Working Cows Podcast, episode 371. This episode is brought to you by Understanding Ag.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag studios. And this episode is brought to you by Understanding Ag. We've been fortunate to feature a number of Understanding Ag's regenerative farming and ranching experts on the podcast over the years. In that time, Understanding Ag's reputation for helping producers understand and successfully and profitably apply money-saving regenerative principles and practices has only grown. And there are two primary reasons for that. First, Understanding Ag's consultants are farmers and ranchers who've been there, done that on their own regenerative farms. And second, Understanding Ag's consultants aren't in the business to sell you costly inputs. They get no commissions and you get no pressure. Just profit-building solutions for your operation. Learn more at understandingag.com and discover the hope in healthy soil. That's www.understandingag.com. Very excited to welcome back to the show Ellen Bench. Ellen is a homeopathic practitioner for animals and people, and she had a big response from the first time she was on the podcast and was getting a lot of the same questions about how you go about implementing a homeopathic livestock health strategy. And so she said, I'd like to come on and answer those questions to the broader audience all at once if I could. And I said, happy to do it. I think we're well aligned in the way that we think about using what God provides naturally to help these animals and that are under our care. And so happy to welcome her back to give her an opportunity to answer some of these questions. And then I solicited questions from some Patreon supporters. Steve Campbell listened to the episode. He sent me some questions, and so we're going to run through some of those as well. Ellen, welcome back to the Working Cows Podcast. Thanks for being here today. Yes, sir. Happy to be here. Yeah, had some great feedback that I received from the first episode that we did together, and I understand that you have had some feedback as well, and have had some people asking questions about just kind of the whole homeopathic approach to livestock health. And so wanted to get you back on sooner rather than later and give you an opportunity to maybe answer some of those questions in a broader platform. So yeah, what are some of the most common questions that you've been getting, and how have you been helping people understand kind of where to start as far as down the homeopathic livestock health journey? Great. Well, thank you, Clay. And I wanted to thank all of you for the opportunity to answer your questions. I'm still working on individually calling everyone back, getting some farm profiles and providing some solutions. But I think that what's obvious is that I didn't give you a plan of action. So I've had some orders for things like pink eye or hormonal wake up, or even questions about lump jaw, which I did mention during our last podcast that I was able to solve for that. So what I wanted to do is kind of go back and start from the beginning and make sure that you know that the benefit of using homeopathy is that it's safe and it's effective, it's inexpensive, it's organically qualified, and it meets the demands of the national market, which is natural and drug-free. And if you can sell or even make aware that you're doing vaccine-free while still protecting your animals against what vaccines are meant to do, is protect your animals from getting ill. The market is amazing. So homeopathy fits that niche, and I think that it's a profitable niche. So in review, we're going to use the nervous system to deliver homeopathic remedies. We're going to heighten the response to wellness and be efficient about it. We can do prevention. We can also do treatment. It's a stress-free application of the remedy, and with supporting people like Steve Campbell, who are giving us
good tools like providing mineral or mineral solutions is that we want to actually be able to assimilate that and make it useful. And it is actually more useful. So if we can get them to assimilate calcium and all the other minerals and the overages and deficiencies in these animals, like too much copper, too much manganese, not enough manganese, not enough copper, and the remedy produces balance in that. They'll either use what they need or discharge what they don't. So that's a really amazing facilitator for you guys that are working hard to provide to your animals what you know is good and seeing results. Is the remedies make that very efficient. So what I wanted to do today, and if Clay has given me permission and encouragement to give you the protocol. So what we want to know is that we're going to use the remedies that are provided in concentrate. They're provided to you in a concentrate. We're going to mix that with water, and we have to do a process that's significantly important, which is to succuss that. So the reason we use a half-gallon milk jug or a half-gallon sprayer, half full, is so that we have room to shake that up and actually imprint the water molecules with the remedy. So we're going to take that half a gallon of water, we're going to add the concentrate, shake it up, then we can use it in a sprayer. So the sprayer is then used to either spray the animals directly or to spray the salt. So the mineral salt, I prefer that it not be in the form of a powder like we'd use as table salt, but in the rock salt format, which is that SEA 90, it has some chunks in it and some fines as well. But the Redmond salt, chunky, even better. But we can spray that salt and then offer it to the animals. When we offer it to the animals, they don't need a huge quantity. They don't need 8 ounces or 2 ounces. They just need a mouthful. If they get the remedy in their mouth, it's absorbed through the mucous membranes and delivered to the nervous system. Your brain is what tells your body for your heart to beat or for you to be hungry, or for you to develop things like inflammation and fight infection. So that's the source that we want to facilitate. We want the nervous system to work. We don't have to do that through their stomach or their bloodstream like we would do with a conventional vaccine. The use of these homeopathic remedies for disease prevention, it is 200 plus years old. It works efficiently. I think what my product offers different than what's available in old books or old vets or old concepts of how to use remedies is that I formulated multiple remedies together to increase their efficiency, and the delivery system is completely different. So if we were to try to give your horse or your dog or your daughter a remedy, we could do it orally with little or no problem. When we're talking about 1,000 cattle, that's an issue. We're not going to put it in their mouth directly. So how do we get it in their mucous membrane? Is by them masticating that salt. So if they put it in their mouth, they slosh it, they chew it, they lick it. And cattle, different than sheep, are easy to also spray if we're going to put them through the chute by spraying their nose. They have that magnificent tongue that wipes their nose. The nose is large. It's an easy target for us to gently spray them as they're being processed on and off a truck, in and out of a chute. And like I said, the salt, which is the universal method for delivery. I think that we're able to deliver about 95% coverage. So there are those cases where they may not eat the salt, which is why leaving it out for multiple days is a good idea instead of assuming that it gets done in one day. I think one application put out and left for up to 3-4 days is even a good idea. But the coverage is outstanding. There are ways of putting the remedy in water, but they're inconsistently effective because the instructions aren't being followed. I've been out in the field with these guys that have water tanks that are overflowing, and they're spraying the top of the water while the wind's blowing with a spray. So that's not a very effective way of penetrating or medicating a big volume, 500 plus gallons of water at a time. So after watching the interpretation and the implementation of how these remedies are used, I deduced that the salt is the most direct method. other than actually spraying the cattle going through, like I said, the chute. So what I want to start with is that we get our herds in better shape. So I know all of you have that goal. We want to be stress-free and increase their vitality. Now, how we're going to accomplish that is we're going to use that homeopathic remedy called number 1, which says immune detox. So the start should always be there. We're going to take away the side effects of the stuff you've done for them in the past. If that's immunizations, if that's a lot of antibiotics, or the futility in using antivirals. So that detox is a significant step for the cattle you already have, and then the animals that you're going to bring in. So the only time you're going to repeat this remedy is when you bring in new animals. Once they're clean, your herd is closed, you're good to go. If you add, that's the only time you're going to pull out that immune detox again. The immune detox can be used. I don't like to use more than 2 remedies at a time, but the 2 remedies that we can use together would be to rebuild their immunity. So we're going to do that, which is what you would assume you were doing with an immunization or a vaccine, but they're not necessarily very effective, and they also make the animals sick. The illusion is that the concept of putting disease in an animal or in a human even is going to give them increased immunity when it does the opposite. It makes them some sick. And the theory is if there's some sick, they'll be more, have a higher immunity or less vulnerable. But the opposite turns out to be the case. So we get repetitive diseases. We get the pink eye over and over. And children are going to get that ear infection or strep over and over. So who wants that? I mean, we want something that heightens immunity, not something that diminishes it under the perception that is protection. So the number 2 is called immune boost. It's also denoted as HP, and HP means homeopathic prophylaxis. Homeopathic prophylaxis has been used for every disease that we know of, and every disease has been made into a remedy worldwide. So I have a set of 150 diseases, not that you need them, but we can use them for tuberculosis and dengue and malaria and measles. So in the cattle diseases, we're going to do that too. We're going to give them provided protection. The protection is well known to be in the 95th percentile or better. And when you're talking about things like pink eye or respiratory, it's huge because we don't have a high death loss. We don't have damaged cattle. We're not taking a reduced fee for them when they go to market. So it's a welcome change to be able to protect your animals in a safe and effective way. I highly recommend that remedy be used quarterly. Some people use it more. I have people I met this weekend when I was in Nebraska that were using it monthly, which is, a lot, but ultimately it's safe and effective. If they want to do it once a month, I didn't discourage them. But I think that most importantly, it be done at season changes. And because we're talking to people in multiple countries and multiple states, you know that better than I do when those season changes take place. But season changes are the plants that the animals forage on. It changes the parasites. It changes their environment, being too cold, too warm, etc. So at those season changes is a really good time to use that immune detox. The next remedy I think is vital and significant and important and needs to be used on a regular basis is what I call pro-vitality. And what pro-vitality is doing is it's encouraging through the nervous system to assimilate minerals and trace elements. So it does copper, it does selenium, it does calcium, it does magnesium, and all the things that we want the cattle to assimilate, and is provided by those high quality products like SEA 90 and like that Redmond salt. So you're putting it out there, and what happens is we're going to use it. And I think that the significant part about that is we're also going to detox what we don't want. So the body's smart enough to know that's too much copper, that's too much aluminum in the soil. So we're going to detox that while we're actually absorbing what we need in balance. Now, the side effect of using this Pro Vitality, and I recommend you put it out on the salt all the time, once a week at least, that what happens is that the animals become more efficient. And over time, you're going to use less and less mineral because they're going to need and efficiently use what they're taking in. So that's really amazing. The crazy side effect while field testing in these herds all over Nebraska, Minnesota, and Iowa while I was traveling is that it did fly control. So the parasites were less in general, but the flies were flying over the animals instead of on the animals that we were testing this Pro Vitality on. So I was thrilled with that as a really positive sign. Now in humans, we do this too, is that we know, or I know by observation, the people who are the bug magnets that get mosquito bit, that get chiggers, are always people that are calcium deficient. So the same thing I assume is happening in the animals, and they're showing that absorption diminishes the bugs on them as well. So that includes all parasites, like worms, like flies. So that's an amazing remedy, and I would keep it out at all times. What you'll see also is better shut off and all the other health signs that you're looking for, that they're perky and, like I said, efficient.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
So just to review kind of the ground we've covered up to this point, basically we wanted to make sure that people are applying it correctly. They're not spraying it on top of the water on a windy day when the tank is overflowing. They're also putting it in a jug that has room in it to shake it up, so that everything gets mixed properly, adhered, all the molecules get adhered properly. Then we want to apply it to a surface, or we want to apply it onto the livestock on a mucous membrane. The nose is great. That's why we use the salt, right?
Right. And the other one is that we can also, like for dairy cattle, when they're lined up, it's great we can spray it on the vulva too.
Right.
It's very efficient.
Then we moved on to the actual process, and you recommended starting with immune detox, and then going to immune boost. Is that right?
Correct.
And then the immune detox is kind of a one-time thing unless you're going to continually introduce new animals to the herd. And
correct. Then the only ones that will need medicating at that point are the new ones.
Right. And then immune
but
boost.
You want to catch the incoming.
Yep. And then immune boost for a period of time, and then Pro Vitality regularly. Is that right?
Right. Immune boost we're going to use initially once. Mm-hmm. Then we're going to repeat it quarterly for protection, because diseases are seasonal, like respiratory in the cold is an example. So that you're going to want to take care of that
sure.
and make it available. The body will use what it needs, but it does all the diseases that cattle are vulnerable to, and not limited to what I listed: anthrax, BBD, TB, white muscle, brucellosis, etc.
Right.
Yonis is a big deal for me.
Yep. And then, so the Pro Vitality, you mentioned just here recently that you said that the Pro Vitality will, help with things that we're paying attention to, like shedding off better and all those things. And that, to me, is an indication of proper hormonal function. When the animals are shedding earlier, those are the more properly functioning animals. And so we're waking up some of these things that indicate vitality. And so that's a once a week type of something that we're going to use once a week on the salt Pro Vitality, right?
Yeah, and remember the parasitic side effect is to have an anti-parasitic disposition, or it is huge. I mean, I think the efficiency of that was a surprise, like I said, because I only recognized it up to that particular point in the human market. But the fact that the cattle responded so well was impressive. So I want to make sure that if you're going to try to do, even I have a product that says diminish flies, that you need to be using Pro Vitality to make it efficient.
Sure. So thank you. I just wanted to review, make sure I was tracking where you were, where we had been, and I will allow you to continue on.
Thank you. The product that's called Alfalfa Booster is really about putting weight on and keeping weight on. So if we're going to want to increase weight and have not like a big winter weight loss in the animals going to market, this is a product that accomplishes that. And I used it. It happens a lot in horses that they're, especially thoroughbreds, where it's really tough to keep the weight on them. You guys are working really hard, whether you're using silage or some kind of enhancement to put the weight on, but this product helps that happen. I like to say at this point, I don't want to use more than 2 remedies at a time on the salt. So if you want to mix alfalfa booster with Pro Vitality, that's a good option for those market cattle. The next remedy is about alternative worming. So Poron, and the way Poron works, or if you want to talk about ivermectin or an anti-parasitic, they're all poison. If you're going to kill something, your animal is going to suffer the consequences. They're alive and they're, it's supposed to be efficient, and you're going to diminish that when you use a Poron or any other type of wormer. So what we want to do is eliminate parasites by actually being healthier instead of being sicker. I think the more we use things like Poron, the more we have to use it. It becomes a routine to keep up. And this is especially an issue where sheep are super vulnerable for parasites. But alternative wormer is efficient. I use it in dogs to even get rid of things like heartworm. And they use, the way we treat heartworm in dogs is with arsenic. And they charge you an enormous amount of money for it on top of that. And your animal may or may not survive the treatment. So we want to avoid the chemicals at as many opportunities as we have, and that's this remedy, alternative wormer. You can do it in your same routine that you would use your Poron. You can also do it, it's great at season changes again, because the forage changes and the parasites that are in the grasses and the trees are changed too.
You're speaking the language of the Working Cows podcast here, because a lot of times we'll have guests who say, what really changed my mind on how I approach agriculture is I realized that all I was doing every day is waking up and deciding what I was going to kill. And everything I was using ended with CIDE, pesticide, herbicide, parasiticide. It was all about killing things rather than fostering life. And so when you talk about using arsenic to kill heartworms, and rather than we just change our approach, change our mindset, look at it a little differently and approach it that way, it ends up being a different mechanism that actually goes to work in our favor. Does that make sense?
It does. And not only that, but if you look at where parasites appear, they always appear in things that are dead. So we're talking about dead wood or the icky stuff on the ground, or the carrion on the ground, and the stool. That's the place that parasites love to be. They love to be in things that are unhealthy. So when you promote that by killing it and lowering vitality, you're actually encouraging more parasites, which in medicine is great. You have to buy more of that product, but ultimately it's not to your benefit. It's not long-term improved health. It's temporary, and like I said, it has a negative result overall. Any more questions, Clay?
I want to give you the opportunity to kind of cover the material that you had in mind, and then I do have some questions from Patreon supporters and from Steve Campbell as well. So,
sure.
Yep, I think I'm tracking with you so far.
Okay. Now, the other category that we want to embrace is things that happen outside our control. And I think we have contaminated cattle, contaminated ground. I've heard the neighbor cattle, the birds that transfer disease from place to place. Is that, can you treat the soil to get rid of staph and strep and pink eye and foot rot and all these things we're told, mastitis, that are in the ground? We have germs ever present 100% of the time. Doorknobs, salt and pepper shakers in restaurants. I mean, your kids are a really good example of that, is who gets sick and who doesn't. It's not because there's plus or minus germs. It's really about your immunity. Can you defend against that? And our biome is full of bacteria. We want to facilitate the bacteria we have to do a good job. So we can do prevention with homeopathy and heighten that immunity. And we use those products for things like respiratory or pink eye or foot rot to mastitis, another one, so we could actually use them for prevention. When we're using remedies for treatment, they're used differently. So there's a more intense application required, and we know that because we've got sick animals, and you better get on it. We want to have the minimum amount of damage possible. So when we treat things that are called acute is a disease typically that comes from the outside, where prevention is coming from the inside. So if we can do prevention ahead of pink eye, you should have very few cases, if at all. When you treat an animal for a disease, let's say scours, you got an animal down, you can use that scours remedy and spray it on their nose while they're in a vulnerable position. You can get close to them, as an example, is that they'll be up within 20 minutes or an hour. By the time you go back or come back again to get multiple doses in, they're already on the mend. So it's pretty obvious that the remedies work for these acutes. Same thing with respiratory. You want to stop the snot, or want to stop the coughing. Within a day or so, their ears should be up and they should be obviously improving. So when we use acute prescribing, we're going to use the remedies multiple times in a row if we get the chance. So you can use it, if you can, 3 or 4 times in a row. We're going to spray them, wait 5 minutes, spray them again. If they're cold, that's an easier thing to do than if they're running amok. You're chasing them down with the 4-wheeler or the horse. But ultimately, if we can get multiple doses on the animals, it works very similar, I say, to starting an old Dodge. So you turn on the starter and it does, You turn the key again, it says, The third time you got it running, and that's exactly what we're doing to the immune system. We're going to encourage it to get up, get moving, go forward. Once it's up and running, we're good. The repeated after that depends on the amount of disease or the degree, like respiratory. You can hit them 3 or 4 times in a day and 3 or 4 times in a row during those 3 applications. But what you're doing in those cases is saving an animal. We're not, which now requires something I didn't talk to you about before. You need a first aid kit. So in the homeopathic remedies are packaged like that for you. And I talked to Steve Campbell, and he said, Ellen, put that opportunity on sale. Let these guys that are watching these, participating in these podcasts, to buy a set. And I did that. So I put them in a case. I gave you one of everything. And when you have a challenge in the moment, you have the tool. If you're going to call me and get it shipped to you in 3 days, we try to ship same day if we can, but you're still talking 3 to 4 days to get it across country. So when you have a set of things that include moldy hay or something that you need for an acute condition like retained placenta, you can get that placenta out while you're calving. You can turn a cow while you're calving. You can do an amazing amount of treatment right there on the spot. So if you have those tools. So I made a set of them in small quantities. So you don't need 8 ounces or even 16 ounces like you would for the routine items you're going to use. But just to have a toolkit on hand is going to be of value. If you have that bag in your truck, you can pull out that retained placenta and it will stop the discharge in the infection and facilitate healing. We're not going to have things like if you see a prolapsed uterus, homeopathically, we can fix that. So we don't have to call that cow. We can actually help her heal. You can turn a baby, actually, a calf, with a remedy if it's done at the beginning of the birth process. So, I mean, if you recognize you're in trouble, we have tools for that. I think that it's, really amazing. So acute prescribing we can use the water in the spray. You can also use the 1 ounce spray bottle yourself. The problem with a 1 ounce spray bottle is that the distance that it sprays is not very far. It's probably about 12 inches. So if you're down with an animal, if they're at the gate or you're going to be able to reach them, that's great. If not, we're back to that sprayer. We're going to mix that remedy in a 1 gallon sprayer, and that gives you 10 feet instead of 10 inches. So that's the reason for using a better tool than the spray bottle itself. The spray bottle, again, contains a concentrate. The concentrate, if used directly on the animal, is very, very efficient. If they've been wounded and you need something for first aid, we have that remedy. It's called Injury Combo, and it will heal a muscle, tendon, ligament, bone, nerve, puncture wound, and cut open. So nothing else needs to be said. It works better than painkillers, including post-surgery I use in humans so that there's no pain meds necessary, and heals at a rapid rate of speed. We don't want animals down. You want them up, and you want them healing. So that remedy does a great job. The remedies that are provided in the next set is foot rot, mastitis, and pink eye. We have travel stress. I think you guys knowing or recognizing that issue for the cattle, minimizing it obviously has benefits. So travel stress is great for that. I think respiratory relief is a fright for all of us to deal with respiratory complaints. If the respiratory complaints are coming from or following weaning, we use the weaning remedy, and it actually prevents the respiratory, the pneumonia. So if we can de-stress them from being separated, both the cow and the calf, they don't bawl. It's really impressive. And the result is no pneumonia. So respiratory relief is really made for a different circumstance, I hope, than weaning. The castrating and branding, when you're running them through the chute, you can spray them. It's going to protect them from tetanus. It's going to protect them from infection. It diminishes the stress, even though the procedure is, wicked and stressful for both of you and them, is that they're going to come through on the other end in much better shape. So we're going to do the mental and the physical in this particular case, castrating and branding. And I think that I developed this remedy by being in the field. And I think, can you use it while you're doing it? Absolutely. A dose will get you through the procedure in better shape too. Now, moldy hay, I think, is an amazing remedy. And my sister, who has cattle and also sells her hay, I said that it's really insulting to say that people have moldy hay, and that it's not very well received to say use moldy hay when I give that advice. And I kind of chuckle about that because mold is in the grass 100% of the time. It's how grass assimilates its minerals. It needs mold. They have a synergistic effect, grass and mold. So mold is always present. When mold is in excess, it causes multiple problems. It creates open cattle. It's the number one reason for abortion. The other thing it does is it's the main reason for most respiratory complaints. That breathing mold or eating that old hay, especially at the end of the winter when you don't want to buy and there's no fresh grass yet. This moldy hay is your go-to. It prevents the respiratory, and it keeps them from being toxic from the mold. If you're using it after your cows have been preg checked and wonder why you have open cattle, this is probably one of the main reasons. The other reason for open cows is STDs, and your bull is after it covers from anything more than a half a dozen to hundreds of cattle. They're hypothetically dirty and they need cleaning up. The number one reason, number two reason behind moldy hay will be some form of infection. So cleaning up your bull with metritis, or if you have cows that have been covered by a bull that needs some help, is instead of using an antibiotic, we can clean them up and send your bull out. I would do this as prevention for the bull when you turn him out, or to add it when you're putting them in the field. So great remedy, but you should have way less open cows now, knowing why cows are open to start with. So I'll take a breath and see if Clay has any questions up to this particular point.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, Understanding Ag. We've been fortunate to feature some of the world's leading regenerative ag and adaptive grazing experts on our show. And many of those experts are farmer rancher instructors from the nonprofit Soil Health Academy. This year, you'll have several opportunities to experience and profit from attending one of their remarkable on-farm schools and workshops. Whether you're interested in learning more about diversifying corn and bean rotations to increase profitability, merging multiple species and marketing, grazing on the high plains and in northern environments, regenerative farming and ranching, or enhancing profits and production in your beef or dairy operation, the Soil Health Academy has a school for you. One of the best investments you can make is in yourself. So visit soilhealthacademy.org to learn more and register. Financial assistance scholarships are available. A couple of questions that I did have come in from Patreon supporters and from Steve. The same question actually was, can you use the brine water that Steve talks about making to make these remedies? And I guess a connected question is, how much does the water matter in the remedies? Like, I've got water. I live on Sulphur Creek. I've got water that has high sulfur content. It's very hard water. We go through 2 bags of softener salt a week at our house just to soften the water some. We drink our water through a reverse osmosis system with a mineral boost cartridge on it as well. So, how much does the water matter as far as making these? And then the connected question, can we use the brine water that Steve Campbell talks about making to make this these remedies?
Thank you for the question. So the problem with having a water supply is typically they have multiple places to get water, including standing water. So I've watched the cattle bend over and drink the water that they're standing in, which has urine and whatever, other contributions the cattle give it to drink. And that's actually the origin of scours, truthfully, is that it's dirty. And now if they're drinking that for a water supply versus going over to that mineral tea, that's a problem. So what we have is an issue or a challenge with coverage. So the other thing is quantity. How much water can you put that brine in? So I talked to Steve about using the water a year or 2 ago, and also about bringing up cattle that we buy that are compromised in health. If you're confining them where you have that as the only source of water, I think that's a good solution. And what we're going to do is mix the remedy the same exact way in that half a gallon jug or sprayer. And then you're going to put that in the bottom of an empty tank. If you add the tea bag to that and fill it with water, then it's effective. If you add it to the top of the water, not so much. So you need the procedure to be correct. We're going to make the dilution. We're going to shake it up in the water. We're going to put the water in the container first. We're going to fill the water under pressure, and then we're going to add the tea bag and stir it up. Great. The quantity of water, is that enough to take care of the animals that you have? If it's a 50-gallon or a 5-gallon bucket, probably, or maybe not. So if they have multiple sources of water, again, I think that's a serious challenge. And they don't seem to have any issues with needing reverse osmosis or even clean water. They'll drink anything. So,
but what about the actual water that we're using to dilute the remedy? That we're putting into the jug to shake up, can we use the brine water? Will that make it better or worse? Can we use lower quality water straight out of the well?
You can use any water you got.
Okay.
And what you're going to do is the remedy, when it's succussed, just shaken hard with the lid on it, which is why a milk jug is so handy. And then you can even dump it into the sprayer. Some of the sprayers aren't a convenient shape and size with a handle like a milk jug is. But if you can shake it and with the remedy in it and then add it as the base for the water that you're going to make with a tea bag, it'll work as long as, like I said, that you can ensure coverage, number one. Number two, have enough to satisfy the amount of cattle that you have, and that they have a limited alternative water source. So if you know they're drinking out of that brine because it's, yummy and desirable, that's great. If they're not, you better come up with plan B to get coverage. So if we're doing this for pink eye, I would be inclined to want to, if you run them through and even spray them, it's always a sure thing. When we immunize them, basically when we're using immune boost or we're trying to prevent a disease, you want, I think, something maybe more reliable. I'm not sure, like I said, in every circumstance is different. And I think after going to all the different farms and seeing their sources of water, whether it's the creek, the pond, the direct drinking from the wet ground, to inline water systems, which, by the way, are easy to medicate if we have that circumstance, where you can medicate an inline tank, a 55-gallon drum, and run it out to the waters that are self-filling from that tank. Those are really good options. But I think you need to have a limited water supply if you're going to use brine water. I think that the brine water for a mineral is different because it's basically a food substance. When we're medicating them, you may want to be a little more, you're going to have to make that decision. Are they all getting that water? And is that the only water source they have? I would eliminate as many alternative sources of water as possible.
Sure.
To make sure you get coverage. That would be my only question. Is the remedy effective to do that? Yes. Is it as effective as treatment, which is more direct? Maybe, maybe not. And I think it's a great idea. I just want to eliminate, like I said, them going over to the pond and getting it. And by the way, in reference to your hard water and the sulfur, there is sulfur in that Pro Vitality. So we're going to use that sulfur efficiently. Sulfur in general is a great antibiotic. It serves a purpose. It just in excess doesn't taste good or smell good, does it? The Pro Vitality does address the sulfur issue.
My water on a livestock water test actually rates good to excellent for livestock. But it does have a lot of total dissolved solids in it, so that it's hard on home systems, and it will curdle your milk if you make your coffee with it and dump your milk into it. So it's more of a practical issue.
The answer to the question is there a Pro Vitality for humans? And it's called improved mineral absorption. And you can spray that daily. You can put it on the table with the salt and pepper. And if everybody in the house uses it once a day, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to uptake what you need and get rid of what you don't.
Sure.
So that's a really handy tool for that kind of a water supply.
Very good.
And we all have one. There's always something.
Yeah.
There's parts in Nebraska that have high manganese, and this guy that I saw in Nebraska this week when I was there, I was telling you, had a low manganese when he had the livers posted. He has a number of dead cattle, and he's new. He moved his cattle from Nevada up here to Nebraska, and what ended up happening was his cattle were dropping like flies and they're not healthy. And it turned out that they had low manganese, and the vet informed him that was a side effect of high glyphosate. So he's looking at how he's going to diminish the nitrates and also clean up his soil. So he's got a big job ahead of him with 1,700 acres. So we'll see how he does. But I did make him a detox. I do make custom remedies for people with problems. I'm going to add manganese to his Pro Vitality so that he can get that deficiency taken care of, and also the flip of it to detox all the herbicides and pesticides that were used on this new land he purchased.
Sure.
So,
well, that's a great segue. Can you tell me a little bit more about the actual crop treatments and some of the treatments that you've done for land and some of the results you've seen there?
Sure. I made a Pro Vitality product for the plants so that they would uptake the minerals. And we have issues depending on what you see or not see or talk about or not, is I've had a lot of questions about the chemtrails and the amount of aluminum toxicity in the soil. So I added that, as well as some of the common parasites in different parts of the country so that I can make an anti-parasitic, antifungal, and a pro-vitality product for plants. It can be put in the inline water systems and sprayed. If you're like you would spray pesticide, you can do that with the remedy. You can spray it right on the ground, right on the plants, and it's highly effective. I think the place to start with that, which is interesting, is in your garden. You see how efficient your garden is and how much parasite control that you actually get from the product. But being able to use it in the bulk and medicate large volumes of water that you spray on your crops is available to you. I do make that product. It's called Plant Grow Thrive. And it's kind of a combination, like I said, between the minerals, trace minerals, and also anti-parasitic. So it's been highly effective. It works really well on plants where we have funguses. So I just did a small orchard of peach trees that had fungus, and the trunks are actually oozing and broken open, and the leaves were all curled, and a couple of direct applications by spraying the trees, and the trees are healthy. They recovered. Took about 2 to 3 weeks, and they're in good shape. The woman was, stunned that such a thing is possible. But we can definitely spray the base of our trees. And I know most of you don't have trees, you have crops. So yes, it can be sprayed, and it can be used just like you're already doing supplements and herbicides and pesticides. You can use it in the same piece of equipment, hypothetically, and go out there and spray your crops. It should be done, I would say, monthly in the beginning of crops, and then quarterly on the ground. But definitely could be detox. I think if anybody has the herbicide pesticide history on their ground, that adding that detox would be a good idea for herbicides and pesticides. That's not part of the common pro vitality for plants, but it is available, and I'm certainly willing to do it for you.
Can you talk a little bit about, in the first episode, you talked about seeing signs early that something needs to be done. And I think you've even mentioned it here with the calves that might need some help during the birthing process. If you can spot those signs early, can you tell me about some of that and some of the strategies that you use to help people spot these things early so that the treatment is more effective?
I think that all mammals give birth, and most of them efficiently. When you see that something is stressful for your cow and you're needing to be out there to babysit and to assist, you should have those remedies available to you to actually hormonally or during the birthing process make it easier, and then to clean them up after so that we don't have discharges. You don't want an infection. You don't want drainage. You don't want that retained placenta. So you can do that right while you're out there being of assist. And most of the farmers I talk to and the ranchers are they have experience. They know when something's wrong. They know when they need to be out there. They know when they need to provide extra care. But the remedies are facilitating to getting that done well. And the death loss should be reduced. You can also treat the calves right there on the way out. If they need injury combo because you pulled them and pushed them and tweaked them and they're damaged in some way, we can repair the damage. If they're not breathing, as an example, we can use the remedy for that to help. We can clear the mucus that they're breathing through in their respiratory. So that remedy works like $1 million. So if you have, like I said, that toolbox and you're out there in calving season, you can facilitate that and diminish death loss. And I think, once you get a couple of those under your belt, it's amazing. It's completely amazing. So the remedies, like I said, done acutely are of great value. You just have to have the tool there at the time, right?
Yeah. You talked in the first...
Having a first aid kit, I call it, is not a joke.
Right. In the first episode we did together, you talked about seeing animals that are acid and alkaline. Are there some indicators, some early warning signs when an animal is going towards being acid, or are there ways to see that, hey, they're coming out of it now, they're not acid anymore?
Well, I talked to Steve about this because I was talking to him about why his salt works and why it works for pink eye or why it works for other ailments that he was medicating for the cattle or, making them healthy, which is the goal for all of us. And I told him that the reason that the salt works is salt is alkaline and that most of the diseases, bacteria diseases, are acid. They occur in a high acid environment. Now, the irony of that is that when we talk about things like high bricks, we're talking about increasing the sugar. When we increase the sugar and we feed corn as an example, which is high sugar and high carbs, high sugar products, it creates the fat, and the fat's desirable in our meat. We all like that tender, flavorful piece of meat. So we have the tendency to think that high acid is a great idea or has benefits for us. Without knowing any better, we're feeding high acid to accomplish that. The more high acid we supplement the animals with, the more bacterial diseases occur. So there's a balance between wanting that fat and wanting your animals to be healthy. So when you have to go out there and put in extra salt or you're force feeding them salt to alkalize them, you have to be asking yourself what you did to make them high acid. Acid's destructive. Acid only is hypericidic. Its acid is cancer in humans. The more sugar we eat, the more unhealthy we are. So in your animals, just the concept of knowing that you're feeding things that are going to increase acid, you best be paying attention to the fact that you're going to want to do some prevention. You're going to want to get heavy on the Pro Vitality so that we can keep them as balanced as absolutely possible. So I think just understanding that concept, you don't want necessarily high acid animals.
Yes, right. Are there signs or things that you can look at and see this animal is or isn't acid or alkaline? Is it just usually it's a manifestation of them not being healthy that says there's an acid issue here?
I think just like I said, if you're seeing high flies, you've got unhealthy animals.
Right.
So the parasites are probably the thing that rats you out the most. Lice is another example. So in the case of lice is actually the old typhus. And we don't talk about typhus anymore. We don't talk about cholera anymore. We don't talk about tuberculosis in the cattle anymore. We've renamed all those diseases to make us socially more comfortable or that the health department's not breathing down our neck. So tuberculosis has been renamed Johne's or other respiratory diseases. We renamed cholera scour so that we don't say cholera anymore as if it doesn't exist. But cholera occurs when they're drinking out of dirty water. And that, by the way, it's deadly. It creates dehydration. They're purging all of their internal energy, and it's deadly. It's serious business. So these diseases being renamed is really, in my opinion, is pretty interesting. In the case of lice, it's typhus, and typhus comes from malnutrition. So the only time we see lice typically is if we're underfeeding, when there's no supplementation. They're eating the old crap from last year, the bottom of the barrel, and the animals are compromised. So when we get them out of that state, when you use that lice remedy, you're treating malnutrition. That's why it works. So if we can plan out your finances enough to supplement in a long winter, you shouldn't have lice.
Yeah.
And that talking about being acidic is always destructive. So there's a consequence for that.
And you've mentioned a few times about dairies and different situations that you've seen in dairies. Dairy can be a fairly challenging environment, I think, because of the fact that a lot of those dairies are fairly just confined, and they're not out on green grass, not in the sunlight, not getting exposed to some of those things that can help with health. So could you share some stories and some things that you've seen on dairies as far as the effectiveness of these homeopathic remedies, related to things like cow life, stomatic cell count, pounds of milk produced, the breed up, butterfat increases, lowering costs? Can you talk to me about some of the things that you've seen happen on dairies as a result of these remedies?
Sure. I think the really important concept with homeopathy is different than drugs. Drugs force something abnormal to happen. The drug forces the body to do something it wouldn't normally do. So in the case of a remedy, we can't increase normal milk supply. We can make it normal so it's adequate and that it's healthy, but I can't make it produce. Same thing would be with hormones. Is that if you're going to force the animal to come into heat, as an example for breeding, if you enhance what's normal, they're fertile already. If you enhance health, you don't have a high somatic count, and remedies cannot force something abnormal to take place. Another example of that is that we can't cause an abortion. So in medicine, we can do that. We can give chemicals to kill a baby. We can cut the baby out, right? We do something that's terribly abnormal. In remedies, we can't. I can't create birth control with a remedy because that breaks a bodily function. I want to enhance bodily function. I want it to be the best it can be. I want it to be healthy. So we can't break something or force it to do an abnormal function. In dairies, they're using steroids, hormones, and daily antibiotics in the ration because they're trying to enhance milk production. And because their environment is unhealthy, they have to treat for bacteria all the time, right? So that somatic count is in what they consider to be an acceptable range. The amount of blood in the milk is in an acceptable range. But the proof is that when the cows are born or the calves are born, in a very short period of time, they're given a ration of milk that's, without the colostrum in most cases. But what happens is that they're born sick. So they have salmonella in no time at all, within a few days to a week. And now we're medicating them additionally to what's already in the milk that they're being fed, which is what, by the way, is what's called for being dirty. So if it's got a high somatic count, that's the tank that they're putting the milk in, that they're feeding the babies. It's really like an oxymoron. There's nothing right or normal about what they're doing. But because I can't overproduce the milk, I can't get 3 gallons instead of 2 gallons, they're not interested because they don't want to take that cut in their income. But the joke about that is that the short lives of those cows is amazing that they don't factor that in. Plus the cost of the ration, the cost of the vet on demand. That most of them, those big operations have a vet employed, on the premises. They're constantly treating disease. The fact that they allow that stuff in our milk is pretty scary. I think the other thing that's really significant about looking at those operations is most of the families, because I treat the families too. So most of the families won't consume their own milk product. They don't want anything to do with it. It's yucky.
Yeah.
It's yucky, truthfully. So that should be a clue. But all I can do for dairies is make the cattle or the cows healthy and the babies, the calves that way too. So I can use the same remedies I'm using on your group of, the outdoor cattle to be the best they can be. The difference really is that we can spray them on the vulva. They're all lined up. Most of them have tags, and they're monitoring each and every cow's production. They can see the signs if they have discharges and if they're snotty, and I don't usually see things like pink eye in dairy cattle. But we can do both prevention and we can do treatment, but we're doing it in the natural market. And I think the natural market or organic milk market is highly discouraged because if they don't have enough volume for the truck to come out and get it, they mix that milk with regular milk, and they're not being paid for a clean product. They're not making an enhanced amount of money. The producer or the bottler is, but they're not as farmers. So that's very discouraging, I think, in our milk community, that they are challenged. In the honorable areas like in Minnesota where they're mass producing organic milk, they have a good market. They make a little more money. They do a really good job. They have a lot of pride in what they're doing, and I'm effective there. But the mass market, those confinement facilities with 1,000 animals or more, they don't really want to talk to me because they don't want normal.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of bringing this back full circle to where we started and kind of wrapping up where we started out is, so let's say we're going to take this approach. We're going to start with the immune detox, then we're going to move on to the immune boost, and then we're going to move on to the Pro Vitality. How much would this prevention cost the first year on a 100 head herd of cattle?
You know what? I've never really looked at that number. I could probably guess that if we bought 6 bottles of 8-ounce product to do 100 cattle for a year, that should accomplish that. You're looking at 200 times the 8 bottles is $1,600. If you bought a set of remedies so you had them on hand, you're talking $2,400. So about $2,400 should be able to do that herd for anything and everything that comes up. And by the way, the remedies never go bad. So if you have a remedy year after year after year, as long as the bottle's secure, you can use that remedy, as needed. So if you are looking at medicating an animal, you're talking for a couple of pennies a dose. So you could probably medicate a sick animal for a quarter. Sure. If you got the remedy to them, a dozen times over that period, like you might need to do with something like pneumonia. If you're doing prevention, it's pretty inexpensive. It's less than a penny a dose to medicate the salt. You can medicate, I think, 1,000 pounds of salt with that half a gallon of water that you just put half an ounce of the remedy in, which is $17. So it's $17 for 1,000 pounds of salt.
Well, very good. Very, again, practical, helpful. Anything, other questions that came up on your end that you heard that you wanted to address? I think we've kind of addressed the ones that I had on my end.
I think that the value, and, when people call me, they call me for solutions for ailments like pink eye. And I think that the piece that I missed that's really important, I'll repeat to you, is that you got to clean up your herd. It makes a huge difference. If we're doing immune detox and then immune boost, and you're doing a regular dose of Pro Vitality, the amount of things that you have to medicate will diminish year after year. The herds get better and better and better. There's some really nice live referrals or testimonials on my website, and those are worth listening to listen to the other ranchers and see what they think. But I think when I have these meetings, like I'll be in North Dakota on 23 August teaching an animal class, is the more they use it, the better it gets and the easier it gets. And that's what they're telling you. When these guys come to participate in those classes, that's what you get to hear. Yeah. Is that they're happy with it, that they're getting results. I rarely hear otherwise. And I'm trying to be here to do private consults or to problem solve. And the office, when you call there, knows where I am all the time. I'm on the go. So if you have a problem, I'd like to be here for you. I think the amount of questions I got this last time are requiring this amount of labor to tell them how to start or do what we've covered in this class or this podcast is going to be, really a relief that they have a plan and they know where to start. And I'm surely here to help in the office too, to make sure they get what they need and give them options. I'd like to hear more back and maybe talk directly to Steve about what he's doing with that brine water to answer that more directly, whether or not they have other water sources and how much water he's encouraging them to medicate with that tea bag. And I think I could address that better. So I'll be happy to follow that up.
Sure. Yep. Sounds good. Ellen, I really appreciate your time today. Again, very helpful, practical, and informative. The show notes page for today will be workingcows.net/372. workingcows.net/372. We will have links in that show notes page to Remedy Animal Solutions and anything else that you want put in there. So,
yes, sir. And thank you again for the opportunity. I love the healthy animals. I think that the fact that we could sell a product that's this high a quality with pride and honor is amazing. And I'm happy to facilitate that in every way.
Very good stuff there. Really appreciate the practical way that she ran through that kind of start to finish approach, and then giving us some ideas about what we can keep kind of in our toolbox in the pickup as we're around, and when we see things that need attention, have them available for that. Very much looking forward to next week's episode of the Working Cows podcast. We're going to be talking to Dallas Mount from Ranch Management Consultants. He has been in the driver's seat there, owning that business for a few years now, and has had an opportunity to see the difference that his decisions and the way that he thinks about business are making differences in the business. And I wanted to talk to him. He's been teaching he's been teaching ranchers to see their operations as a business first for all these years, and now he's been running that business. And I wanted to see what are some of the things that have been useful to him as a business owner. What are some of the concepts, phrases, ideas, just frameworks, ways of thinking about things that have been helpful to him as a business owner. And so we'll be talking to him about that next week on the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you again real soon with another episode of the Working Cows podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.